Thanks to everyone for coming to this. Let me introduce the people here from left to right who are participating in this. Jeff Glotzel, he's a digital artist specializing in photo illustration and in compositing, high-end retouching for advertising clients. Next, we have Sherry Heineman. She was an art director at the Martin Agency and now at Sidel. She spent years helping some of the biggest names in America look good. And as an executive creative director at Sidel, she's helped the agency's creative department raise its already high bar even higher. Along the way, her keen eye and exceptional taste have been recognized by the One Show, Communication Arts, the New York Art Directors Club, and many other creative awards. Outside of her work, she's successfully raising 2 children and lots of plants. Next, we have John Henley, who studied photography at the San Francisco Art Institute. He's worked as a commercial photographer for ad agencies and magazines around the country for the last 30 years and is currently teaching at VCU while continuing assignment work as well as personal projects. Up here, we have Todd Wright, who couldn't be here tonight because he's having hip surgery. He's been shooting still photos for 15 years for clients like Seiko and Walmart, AOL, DuPont, Chase Bank. Recently started directing TV commercials. So those are our participants tonight. So in 2009, the Science Museum of Virginia partnered with Sidel, and in the following 2 years, the Sidel staff created a new logo for them and graphic standards, in addition to doing research and brainstorming with them, with the museum staff. And in 2011, the Sidel team led by Sherry concepted this ad and brought in John, Todd, and Jeff to produce it. In November 2012, it was chosen for the cover of the prestigious Communication Arts Advertising Annual. So that's a brief history of it. So let me start. I'm going to try to go in chronological order and start with Sherry. So how did the ad originate? Did the Science Museum come to you about doing an ad, or did you go to them and say, you know, you guys need an ad?
No, they came to us and they wanted to be rebranded. The director and the marketing director there are just very insightful people, and they really took this task on. And we brainstormed a lot with the staff, and they helped us define the Science Museum in basically 3 words, and that is curious, discover, and inspire. And the one that won, the one category that they really, really felt like was right for them was curiosity, and that's what this idea was in. And we did present a whole bunch of ideas of, basically this came from everyone's innate desire to explore and look. I mean, we all have it, you know, and if you have kids, you know that they look under everything. It's just, if they could lift the ocean, they would.
What's your process with your team in terms of coming up with a concept? They gave you a brief, they inspire, right, curious, the whole thing. So you have a team, you, copywriter. Can you describe what you go through when you're putting that together?
So I worked with David Deal, who's a great copywriter in Richmond, and really we just take the brief and we sit in a room and make everybody stay away from us, and we just throw out all the stupid ideas, because you know I always like to say you have to unpop that cork, let the stupid ideas out. Once those ideas, stupid ideas come out, then the gems come, and really it's just a matter of just sitting down and just thinking. You know, thinking differently, with curiosity, and I think really this did come from, we both have kids, and watching our kids, and then my memory of being a kid and always wanting to lift up the water and see the fish, you know, if you could just take all the water out of the ocean, what would be under there?
So once you get these ideas, did you go to the Science Museum and present them with a bunch of these ideas, or for each word, or were you locked into this one to begin with?
we went to them with probably, in each of the 3 words, we probably had maybe 10 very strong ideas that were, this one was, I would say, the best, but we had probably 30 ideas that we took to them. And they were comped up. They weren't really like napkin sketches. They were.
Was this one a tough sell for you guys to them, or did they lock right onto this one to begin with? Or?
They did. They, you can see my Photoshop skills versus Jeff's. So that's what I did to sell the idea.
So then, how do you assemble a team to produce this? Did you put this out to? Did you consider more people than just John, Todd, Jeff?
We had them bid on it, and then we had one other group bid on it.
Did you ever consider doing it on location? This was a composite, obviously, between.
We did, but
it was the wrong time of year.
That was one of the factors.
What time was it? I'm trying to.
It was like November, I think.
Yeah, that's right. We were thinking about a little boy out in the cold.
Turning blue.
But also, John's. The image that we ended up using is one of John's that he had already shot, and it's just so stunning, that I was thinking we could plan a day. They don't have much of a budget. We could plan a day and drive down there and shoot this, but there's no guarantee that we'll ever get anything as stunning as what is already in the box. So that was really a big part of it. We figured it would be easier to just shoot the kid in the studio, and then we'd have more control.
So how did you come to choose John and Todd for this over the other photographer?
Well, I've worked with all of them before, and it's a really good team. And like I said about John's photography, he's just, everybody knows he does beautiful location shots. And I knew that he would have something that we could use. And I've worked a lot with Todd. So it's a relationship thing, really, more than anything. We've just had a good relationship.
Did y'all have any input, Jeff and John and Todd? I mean, how much input were they putting in to this as y'all were approaching? I mean, you had a layout, a fairly tight layout. Was there any input from Todd, or what was y'all's conversations like?
I like to be on the shoot if there's going to be components shot that are going to need to be composited by myself later. So that's my background, if any of you don't know, is in commercial photography. So I worked in a commercial studio for a long time. I'm very comfortable with lighting and all of that stuff. So talking to the photographers about how to shoot something to make it as easy as possible and realistic as possible to composite together later is something that it's pretty rare for me to do, but I love it when it happens to be involved this early in the game. So we had talked about the angle with which we were going to shoot the boy, and we talked about how his scale in the frame was going to be remarkably different than it would be in reality. And you'll see as we go through the slideshow of how it was physically put together. So we had to look at the angle at which we were shooting him, and also the donor, I like to call it donor material, the background plate, in relation to the quality of the light and the color of the light. And sometimes I like to have things lit a little softer and a little flatter than they're going to be in the final composite, so that I can have some control over painting shadows in or taking them away or painting highlights in. Because if you have a hard shadow or a highlight that's burning out, you are locked into that and it's going to take a lot to undo it. But if it's kind of soft, then you have a lot more play in Photoshop after the fact. So I definitely remember having conversations about that, and did go to the shoot at Todd's studio to be there to kind of advise on the set. on that day for little things that might make it easier. Like in particular, we did shoot at the end. We shot an additional frame with a hard light. This was shot very softly. We put a really hard light way up high to cast a shadow. Because if anybody's, I'm not really an illustrator by trade, but if you ever try to draw a cast shadow for a complex object like a person, it can be kind of tricky. And so I like to try to create one whenever possible, and then just take that plate. And I didn't actually use the real shadow, I just traced it and then brought it in, and it ended up compressing it a bit to fit within the frame. But that's kind of how I get involved early on when I can. And sometimes to even, if I'm putting different pieces of stock together, look at the quality of the light and the color of the light, the direction of the light, and the focal length of the lens and that sort of thing, and kind of decide if they're going to fit together and if we can make it work.
What's the first thing you think about when you look at a layout like that?
Well, the first thing I thought is I'm not going to have exactly the right picture because it's a very specific photograph, getting that close to somebody, shooting low like that. So Jeff had to do a lot of finagling because actually the way I shot that picture, I think I was up on about a 10-foot ladder or something when I shot the picture of the wave.
I guess my question to you is, if this came to you and Todd wasn't involved in it at all, how would you have approached it? Would you have first looked and see if you had a background plate that would work, or would you think about shooting the background plate?
Well, I would always think about shooting it because that's what I like to do, but I knew that was not a possibility. I also knew, like I said, that I didn't really have exactly that image. I had low images, but they weren't very pretty. So I just gave Sherry the best images that I had, that had the prettiest waves and the nicest sand and the nicest sky. This happens to be, all of this is in Florida, by the way.
Virginia.
Later on, I did play a pretty active role talking with Jeff back and forth about matching Todd's picture and light to not so much as light because that was kind of a done deal, but the color of the model, the color of my picture, whether they looked like they were shot in the same time of day with the same color temperature. And we collaborated a great deal on that, which, I was appreciative of that because, frankly, I'm always a little skeptical about dropping studio shots into real locations. And if it's not done very skillfully like Jeff did, it looks pretty obvious and contrived, and sometimes that's okay because that's what the person is trying to do. But in a case like this where you're trying to make it look real, I knew that we needed to really match the color of light and all of that sort of thing.
So you always start with the background plate
and actually
and shoot the foreground to match?
The other thing is in a studio you get such hyper sharp images compared to what you would get shooting outdoors. So it becomes a bit of a trick to not make it look, that also I think can make it look artificial. If the subject is super sharp with an electronic flash studio sharp, and then you're working with a photo that's made in natural light. Yeah, I don't know whether you had to do anything with that or not. But
I think because we so carefully planned it, it was not as dramatic. I definitely degraded the sharpness of the boy because his relative number of pixels that he was made up of was probably 5 or 10 times higher than the background. So you have to reduce, you have to bring the clarity down, hit him with a little, blur and noise and blur in layers, and kind of bring it down until it matches. Then depending upon how it's going to be used, sometimes it's not so relevant if it's going to be on the web. As long as it's relatively close, it's fine. And the halftone pattern, when it prints, is going to knock some of that down. But you want to get it as close as possible. I think you're completely right.
I think we actually talked about that, because I don't know that I saw a version where I thought he was too sharp. I can't remember now, but I know we discussed that because in the end, I mean, I've had photographers tell me that they thought this was done on the beach.
Really?
Yeah, which is pretty high praise.
Now, John brings up something that I definitely wanted to touch on, wherein this is a very unusual art direction situation, and Sherry and John and I have worked, and Todd as well, have worked on a number of projects together, and John and Sherry together have been part of the feedback loop, and Todd on this project was part of the revision process, where it was going out to everybody and coming back, and they were having a very civil conversation, which isn't always the way when there's more than one person art directing, on how to do things and to express color and tone and feeling together. We did this on a state fair project a couple of years ago as well, and it's pretty incredible and rare to see two people work together like that and share that responsibility and work together without having, I think they have a very similar sensibility in some ways, to be able to work together like that. But for me, it's wonderful to have that kind of, because oftentimes the photographer takes the picture, or if it's stock, they never even know that this work is being done, and they have no say, no control over the final result of how their work is incorporated into the equation of the final piece. So this is kind of a very special project in that way for me.
So what was it like working, and you're gonna have to answer this since Todd's not here, but I mean, working with the little boy, was it difficult working with him, and how did you get him this look of wonder he has and curiosity how did that go?
Kids are hard to work with, and especially if they're not actors or professionals, they're just little neighborhood kids. But he was just in awe of the big studio, and maybe that was part of the wonder, I think. But we had a sheet, and
I think that was Todd's idea, actually,
to do the sheet, to lift it.
To physically have him
Yeah.
be lifting something up and peeking under it to really mimic that action. And I did a rough comp on the set. We had him get into the position and take that and just kind of like do a quick mashup and to make sure that everything's working from that perspective. But this is a great story.
And
Go on.
the little boy was just, I mean, he would lift the thing, and he just, was, how many times do I have to do? You could just tell he was annoyed. And then we were thinking, well, what can we do? We've got to do something and put something under there. So we just put a whiteboard under there and then started drawing things. And every time he would lift it, it would be something a little bit different. And we got laughter, I mean, that's not what I wanted. I didn't want laughter. I think we ended up with a drawing of a cat that had a speech bubble coming out of his mouth, and it said oink. So, I mean, you do what you have to do. And we ended up, but it was also, he had to get himself into some weird little poses because
it's a contorted
his
position.
face was in front of his arm was in front of his face. We couldn't see his face, so we'd say, lift your elbow an inch. No, go back down. Lift your elbow an inch. I mean, we got it, but it did take a while.
How long was this on him?
I'd say model on the set, maybe 2 hours.
2 hours.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the lighting on it, because you were saying you prefer that softer light, and you've got kind of a hardish
It needs to be
directional light here. Did Todd start to light it hard and you brought him back, or did you talk to him before and say?
We had a conversation
Give me a
beforehand
soft.
about it, and I mean, he had it pretty much ready to go when we got there. We made a few small alterations just based on his body language and how low he was bending. But you can see it's a white floor in the studio, so there was a bit of bounce, and he moved the light around, and but we had talked about the quality of the light, and just from my own experience, I know that the direction of the light has to be correct, and the quality of the light, just needs to be a little softer when you're going to do a composite like this than you might think, because if you light it just like that, invariably You don't have any control to pull it back if you've got a hard shadow and hot specular highlights.
So you've got the two stock photographs to work with and the talent photograph to work with. So what is your thought process when you get these three pieces? What's the first thing you think? Or do you sit down and plan it out? Do you
Well, this was pretty
jump right in? What do you do?
It's pretty cut and dry until we get to the wave. So the first thing that, I can probably jump into the sequence. So the first thing that's going to have to happen is the people have to be removed, and the reflections and their shadows as well. So, boop, there's a button for that. No. Now that's probably, an hour's worth of work to remove them. The sky actually, even though I show it in the slideshow, that's on my website, is as the sky popping in now. We actually went with the original sky for quite a while, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So laid the boy in. This is pretty much what I did, and then just dropped the opacity when we were in the studio just to check and see that things were working. And you can see that his scale, if he were really there, he'd be about a 40-foot 10-year-old. So we're definitely, altering the scale a bit. But I think,
Did you question that at all? I mean, that's
did
just
a quick mock-up, and everybody
problem?
just looked at it and said, that looks pretty natural. So, so then he has to be removed from his background. So chop him out. And then the fun begins. This was, the creating of the wave was something that, I talk about this from time to time. I'll say, sure, I can do that. And then I'll hang up the phone and I'll think, oh my God, how am I going to do that? And then there's, of course, a client waiting to be pleased and a ticking deadline clock. But honestly, I think that is one of the most incredible ways to push yourself, is to do it without a safety net. So I knew roughly how I was going to do it, and I started working with the waves. And you can see that wave is not the same wave that is there. I actually called John at a certain point when I started playing with the wave and said, do you have any alternate frames from this shoot that are the same light, the same water, the same everything, only the wave action is different. And thankfully, John had a lot of extra frames. I think that there's 4 extra frames that I used as wave donor material. So you can see the little additions here. So craft that little foam edge that creates the transition. There's another shot of another wave rushing back, composited in. This was the tricky part. He's now lifting the wave, and creating the backside of the wave was particularly, like, I had no idea how to do. Again, I'm not that, I couldn't paint you a picture like this, so I had to do a lot of research. I did a Google search and looked at surfing photographs, and looked at water and how it behaves when it's in motion and behaving in that sort of way. And I just looked at a lot of that, and that's kind of how I came up with what I wanted to do there, and then just had to try and piece together enough pieces out of what John had sent me. Waves crashing, you can see a couple in the background, and just grabbing bits of that and doing a little bit of illustration. There's the shadow, his cast shadow, and also if you look, you can see I've really taken that pretty flat boy, flatly lit boy, pretty evenly lit boy, and painted in some cast shadows, a shadow from his arm. There's his reflection.
Jeff, go back to the first one again.
The flat one?
Yeah, that looks so much more flash lit.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks very flash lit. And then whatever you did makes it look.
It just makes it fit in.
Yeah.
And it's having a background in commercial photography and doing a lot of retouching. Oftentimes I'm asked to remove shadows on things like that. So you really start to think about the direction of the light and how it's going to behave, and that kind of dictates. And sometimes I'll even do a test. If I don't know how something's going to behave in a certain scenario, I'll set up a little tester, like, bend a piece of aluminum foil into a shape and bring it to the window and see how it behaves and cast a shadow. Put a little reflection in there where you just take them and flip them down and screen it back, and then I reduced the size of the shadow, a little gradient to bring it back up because it would fade off as it goes away. And this last thing, when you step in wet sand, how it kind of, distorts and mounds up. So I added a little mound around his feet and hit a couple of his toes under the sand, and then a few other little touches. This, I think that this is right where Sherry saw comp, and she's like, I think you need a little more highlight to just enhance the light a little bit. You know, giving it a little bit more of a frozen, quick shutter speed kind of look, and then a little extra froth on the edge of the wave there. This is just the rough comp that I did. Like I just started slapping the pieces together and sent this over. So that's version 1. So that was just a rough to get an idea of size and scale and positioning and that sort of thing. So this was comp 1. Comp 3 is almost all the way there. There's 4. Comp 2, we had such an extensive conversation about where we were going, and once I knew that the placement was okay, I took it what I would consider to be about 80% of the way there before I even showed them another comp, which is very dangerous for me to do with my time. But I knew where we were going.
So with you, how does the revision process work? Just sent you the first comp. Do you take that? You don't show that to the client. You deal with that. You wait until you get to the final version before they ever see it? Mm-hmm. Do you ever get to the final version and they go, well, no, that's not there? And then you start over again?
No, that hasn't happened. I mean, they knew the concept, they knew the idea. Yeah. We took the portfolios of John and Todd and Jeff over to the Science Museum and showed them, you know, to prove that these guys are professionals and they know what they're doing. So they had that trust, and they trusted us.
So basically, the revision comes to you, and you go
Yeah.
make them smaller, make them bigger, change the sky, and
and it was
make those adjustments and send her a new comp.
It is. I want to say it really is about teamwork. I think that the reason that this image is so good is because of the teamwork from the client all the way through to the end of the process to Jeff. Everybody worked together, and everybody wanted this thing to be as good as it could possibly be. So any kind of input was always respectfully done, and there was really, I don't recall any egos. It was really just about, let's make this thing as good as we can, and I think we did that.
I know, let me just add something. I think it was an amazing amount of teamwork, and we all wanted it to be wonderful. But I remember Roberta called me on the sky and said, you know, it's a nice sky, but it's just not epic. It's not wonderful. We don't have any more money, but do you have any more skies? And I said, sure, because at that point, I just wanted it to be as good as it could be. So I just think that was the way we all sort of felt about it.
So as long as you brought up the sky, tell us about the sky. And
well, I wanted to put in a little pitch for doing business the way the ASMP advocates doing business, because I actually shot this on assignment all of this on assignment down in Palm Beach, Florida. And the client wanted very extensive usage, paid for a good price for it, but never asked for or expected to have exclusivity on the pictures. So I own the pictures. I was able to sort of make a little more money, plus help create a really wonderful ad by using work that I had already done and been paid for. And all of that was possible because we negotiated a very, very carefully and a deal that we both understood, and so I was very comfortable. We could not, of course, have used these models because I didn't have a deal with them, but since they were not going to be in the picture, the skies and the beach were mine to use over again. So I just, you know, I think that's a very important part of the success of this. I have a very large file of pictures, many of which were shot on assignment that are still out there that I can use for whatever.
So this may be a question that would lead to a whole new program. Who owns the copyright to this photograph?
I don't think anybody does. You know, because we've
all
never,
three of them.
we've really never registered this photograph, but if we did, it would be a very complicated thing with a bunch of names on it for sure. It would be a collaborative, shared deal.
How many hours did you have in on this, do you think?
I did not keep track, though. I would guess
A rough guess,
20,
20?
Really?
maybe, not counting the shoot.
And this was real successful in terms of winning awards. It got the one show, didn't it? What other awards did it get?
The Richmond show.
Richmond.
The Richmond, okay, that's what I meant.
We won gold.
Yeah. And so it was very successful with awards. How successful was it with the Science Museum?
It was great, actually. I've got it right here. Within a year of this coming out, the new brand, this image and the logo, up 92, the memberships were up 92%. Wow. And the admission and programming was up 71%. They also, shortly after, had a $60 million fundraising campaign delivered. And they just recently got a $100,000 grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation to design a learning lab. So they're very happy.
Just as successful for them.
This is the sort of thing I never get to know.
Yeah.
I don't see anything that happens at the agency beforehand. I get involved generally with a phone call for an estimate and to see the rough mock-up or a napkin sketch or something like that. Generally, napkin sketches have kind of gone away for the most part because clients are sophisticated now and they want to see a rough Photoshop mock-up. But it's really interesting and fascinating for me to hear when something that we've done, even if it's a great image and wins award, is actually successful for the purpose it was designed for.
I know, and you know, I just found this out just recently. So it was shocking.
That's cool.
92%.
So whenever I leave a shoot, I always go, geez, I wish I had done that. So what do you wish you had done on this in hindsight? Is there anything you'd do differently or wish you had done, or you're nodding your head?
There's one tiny little thing that once it's pointed out, you will never not see it. The horizon line is not straight.
You know what?
That would be John's fault, wouldn't it?
I actually had a little bit of a heated conversation last night. Somebody told me he was astounded that the horizon wasn't straight. And first of all, I'm thinking, does it have to be? Where's the rule that says it has to be?
It does.
And it looks great.
It does not. It does not have to be straight.
There is a little bit of a curve.
There's a bit of curvature that you see with your eye, but this is also a wide-angle shot. So a little bit of distortion like that is completely natural, in my opinion.
I did it on purpose.
Thank you.